This presentation will examine student rights at the federal, state, and local levels, focusing on how laws are interpreted and applied in school settings. I selected student rights as my topic because they directly impact daily decision making in schools and require educators to balance individual freedoms while maintaining a safe learning environment. This topic is especially important because failure to properly apply student rights can result in legal action against a school or district. This slide introduces key legal terms that are foundational to understanding student rights. These terms are commonly defined within legal statutes and court rulings and are essential for interpreting how student rights are actually applied in schools. Concepts such as due process, reasonable suspicion, and substantial disruption help guide decision making when balancing student rights with school responsibilities. So these definitions will be referenced throughout the presentation as we examine how student rights are addressed at the federal, state, and local levels. Slide 3 is simply a continuation of those definitions regarding our topic. The U.S. Constitution provides the foundation for student rights in schools. Several amendments are particularly relevant to education. The First Amendment protects student expression, although it can be limited in cases of disruption. The Fourth Amendment governs searches conducted by school officials, requiring reasonable suspicion rather than probable cause. The Fifth and 14th Amendments ensure due process, especially in disciplinary situations. The 14th Amendment is especially important because it applies constitutional protection to state-run schools. The Eighth Amendment relates to punishment, which is why many states, including New Mexico, prohibit corporal punishment. And finally, the 10th Amendment reminds us that education is primarily controlled by the states, which explains why state laws and local policies play such a significant role in how student rights are implemented. Several court rulings and statutes have significantly shaped how student rights are understood and applied in schools today. Tinker versus Des Moines is foundational because it established that students do not lose their constitutional rights at school, but it also introduced the concept of substantial disruption, which schools use to determine when speech can be limited. New Jersey versus TLO is important because it lowered the standard for student searches from probable cause to reasonable suspicion, allowing schools to maintain safety while still protecting student rights. Hazelwood versus Kuhlmeyer clarified that schools can regulate speech in school-sponsored activities such as newspapers or performances if the regulation is related to legitimate educational concerns. Similarly, Bethel versus Frazier reinforced that schools can prohibit speech that is considered inappropriate or disruptive to the educational environment. And then finally, FERPA is a key federal law that protects the privacy of student records, ensuring that schools handle student information responsibly. Together, these cases and laws define the balance between student rights and the school's responsibility to maintain a safe and effective learning environment. New Mexico law builds on federal protections by providing more specific guidance on how student rights are implemented in schools. Section 2254 requires districts to create discipline policies, ensuring that students are treated fairly and consistently. This helps prevent arbitrary or discriminatory discipline practices. Section 2210A27 supports teacher authority in maintaining classroom order, but it also reinforces the need to balance authority with respect for student rights. We have NMAC 611.2 that outlines both student rights and responsibilities, helping define expectations for behavior while protecting students within the school environment. NMAC 6113 is especially important because it establishes due process requirements for disciplinary actions such as suspension and expulsion. So this ensures that students are given fair procedures before significant consequences are imposed. Finally, compulsory attendance laws guarantee students access to education, reinforcing that education is both a right and a legal requirement in New Mexico. Together, these statutes show how New Mexico interprets federal law and translates into clear expectations for schools, teachers, and students. At the local level, student rights are implemented through district policies adopted by the Portales Municipal School Board. These policies must align with both federal and New Mexico law and are applied daily at the campus level. The student conduct and discipline policy establishes expectations for behavior and outlines progressive discipline practices. This ensures that students are treated fairly while also maintaining order in the school environment. In New Mexico, districts are required to use structured disciplinary approaches and document incidents, which directly impacts how administrators handle behavior situations. The anti-bullying policy is especially important in protecting student rights. Districts must provide procedures for reporting, investigating, and documenting bullying incidents, as well as preventing retaliation. These requirements ensure that schools actively protect student safety and well-being. Finally, non-discrimination policies ensure that all students have equal access to educational opportunities. Portales Municipal Schools explicitly state that programs and services are provided without discrimination based on factors such as race, gender, or disability, reinforcing students' rights at the local level. At the campus level, these policies directly influence daily decisions, how discipline is handled, how student safety is protected, and how equity is maintained. For example, in a classroom setting, these policies guide how teachers respond to behavior, protect student dignity, and ensure that all students are treated fairly and consistently. So in my own classroom at Portales High School, these policies directly guide how I address student behavior, ensure fairness, and maintain a safe and respectful rehearsal environment. The administrative level. Understanding student rights is not just theoretical. It directly impacts legal compliance and school liability. One of the most critical requirements is due process. According to Goss versus Lopez, students must be informed of the charges against them and given an opportunity to respond before being suspended. Failure to follow this process can result in legal challenges against the school. Search and seizure is another area with clear legal expectations. School officials must have reasonable suspicion before conducting a search, and the scope of the search must be appropriate to the situation. Overstepping these boundaries can violate student rights and expose the school to liability. Documentation is also essential. Administrators must maintain accurate records of disciplinary actions, investigations, and decisions. Proper documentation provides legal protection and ensures consistency. FERPA requirements must be followed when handling student records. Unauthorized disclosure of student information is a violation of federal law and can result in serious consequences for the school. Finally, schools must enforce non-discrimination policies consistently. Any failure to provide equal access or fair treatment can result in legal action. These requirements demonstrate that administrators must be highly knowledgeable and intentional in their actions, as failure to follow legal guidelines can lead to significant liability for both the school and the district. These quick tips are designed to support administrators in making sound, legally defensible decisions related to student rights. First, it is critical to understand the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause, especially when conducting searches. Schools operate under a lower standard, but it must still be justified. Second, due process must always be followed, even in situations that seem minor. Skipping steps, even unintentionally, can lead to legal issues. Documentation is one of the most important tools an administrator has. Accurate records ensure accountability and provide protection in the event of disputes. Administrators must also consistently balance student rights with the need to maintain a safe and orderly school environment. Consistency is key. Policies must be applied the same way to all students to avoid claims of unfair treatment or discrimination. Protecting student privacy is also essential, especially when handling sensitive information or communicating with others. And finally, when there is uncertainty, it's always better to pause and verify policies rather than risk making a legally questionable decision. These references include federal case law, federal statutes, New Mexico Administrative Code, and local district policy. The New Mexico Administrative Code, specifically Title VI, outlines student rights and responsibilities at the state level, while local policies such as the Portales Student Handbook demonstrate how those laws are applied at the district and campus levels. Notice that these sources move from federal to state to local, which mirrors how law is actually normally applied in schools.